So what are community schools? They're schools that stay open for extended hours, offer students and families access to important social and health services, and seek to become centers of community life by promoting parent and community investment in the school.
I believe that poor education is the single biggest social injustice a child can have. A child can, especially with help, get through in circumstances of poverty, but a child that is given a poor education will very often remain poor. A child that is given the chance of a great education can make something of themselves. So education is the great human liberator, in my view. The challenges, and this is the reason why community schools are so important, is that the poor kids are often, even usually, in the worst schools. And they're congregated together as well, many times. In many education systems, this isn't incidentally something that's just for the US system or the UK system. You can see it all over the world. The school should become, if you like, a center for the support and nurture of the future generation, not simply education in the narrow sense, and a hub for the whole of the community. It should be a resource and a source of strength, not just for the people, the children, the students that go in the school door, but also for the whole of the community. So what we found with our community schools, extended schools as we call them, using the facilities for adult learning. Because actually one of the problems often with parents is that if they've had a poor education, sometimes that is a disadvantage for them, obviously, but it's also a disadvantage for their children when their children are trying to learn. You know, the fact is, if your parents aren't part of the school community, if they're not in there being talked to, helping, understanding where they've got to step up to the mark as well as the school, it won't work. It's got to include the whole community. I mean, if you take the principle of community schools being that the whole community is involved, make the conversation with the whole community. Because what they will tell you is not often things that you want to hear or things that are easy to do, but it will be the truth about how they find their local schools and the system in which they live. That is the single most exciting thing in watching a child be educated well. And in some of the schools which we changed, you could go in those schools and you could see kids, and they came from the poorest backgrounds, and you could just feel how they were blossoming and flowering and developing as a result of a good education. And so that's why when you're talking about community schools today, it's worth keeping in our minds what our goal is. And that is so that these children, in whatever circumstances they've been brought up, which they cannot change, we should give them the ability to be the most that they can be through the gift of good education.
Schools that are open 6 hours a day, 5 days a week, 9 months out of the year don't meet anyone's needs anymore. They don't meet middle-class families' needs. They don't meet single moms' needs. They don't meet the needs of children who are coming from no-parent homes. Our schools have to be open much longer hours with a wide variety of after-school activities for children and for parents. And when children learn and families learn together and the schools are part of the community, great things happen for children. Rich, poor, black, white, Latino, doesn't matter. When schools are islands from the community, when they're separated from the community, children suffer. And there was absolutely initial reluctance. Your buildings open longer hours. You know, who pays for what, who's in control of what, letting go, that's not something we as educators always do easily. But I would tell you, because the results were so dramatic, principals talking to principals created in 2 or 3 years a huge amount of demand. I saw Beth Swanson was here, did a lot of work, and Judy Diamond sort of leading that effort. This was where government, nonprofit, the philanthropic sector, local money, state money, federal money is by far the biggest leverage dollars that we spent. 6 to 1, 7 to 1 for everything we were doing. But having everyone invest and be part of the solution was hugely, hugely important. When you do GED classes, when you do ESL classes, when you do family literacy nights, when you do counseling, when you have healthcare clinics there, we had a set of schools where you had literally 100 to 150 parents coming to school every day, not for their children's education, but for their own. And when families learn together, children are going to do extraordinarily well.
I have confidence in our success because we're working in the long tradition of great educators and civic leaders who reimagined schools for their own times. There was a time, of course, when school buildings weren't expected to contain much beyond classrooms, chalkboards, and chairs. But more than a century ago, faced with the demands of urbanization, immigration, and universal education, the first community schools reformers came to realize that schools can be and must be more than just places for instruction. A decade of research, full-service community schools has consistently shown that they promote higher student achievement and literacy, stronger discipline, better attendance and parental participation, a reduction in dropouts, and an increased access to preventive health care. The only facility that is common to every community in America is a school and a firehouse. Now, the firehouses, for the most part, are not places where gathering goes on, where you want to have an efficient ability to egress quickly without people in the way. But schools are common to every community. They're accessible to every community. And unlike some other facilities in our communities, which are not so successful, housing offices are not very common in communities. Healthcare facilities, sometimes, but not always, common to a community. But a school is there. As the educator John Dewey put it in 1902, and I quote, "The conception of the school as a social center is born of our entire democratic movement."